Les Paul is truly one of the legendary figures of 20th century American music. Many of you know his name because it's the name of an electric guitar that many rock musicians still play, the Gibson Les Paul guitar. But Les Paul's contributions to music go well beyond having his name on a guitar. He was born in 1915 in Waukesha, Wisconsin. And from an early age, Les had a very inquisitive mind. He also loved sound. He says that he would listen to the railroad trains going past his house or listen to the birds out in his yard. And he was always thinking about these sounds and what they meant. By the age of 9, he created his first crystal radio set. He also began playing guitar at around that time, and by the time he was 13, he was out playing semi-professionally at various clubs and venues around Waukesha. But from the time he started playing guitar, Les became aware of what he thought were problems, and he tried to solve them. That's what led to his developing the solid body electric guitar. But he did more than just that. Let's go back a little bit to Les's early years in his childhood home. And what we have here at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame are literally some radios and record players and things that come directly from the house that Les grew up in Waukesha. Over here is a RCA turntable and radio set. This dates back to the 1920s, and on this, Les would listen to many of the radio stations that would come in. Growing up in a place like Waukesha, Les didn't have the opportunity to go out and see a lot of bands or artists or anything like that, but he would listen to music over the radio, and that exposed him to a whole broad range of things, from jazz to popular hits and other things. And he was constantly kept his ear to that radio. Likewise, when he was fortunate enough to go out and get a record, which wasn't that often, he would play it on this turntable here. You can see this is a very vintage-looking piece of equipment, but that's the state of sound in 1929. As I said, Les Paul often when he would be playing, he would think of things and try to make them better. So over here are some really amazing artifacts from Les's childhood. Here is a little Sears radio. And again, that's something that Les would listen to. It would be in his living room, or sometimes he'd take it up to the bedroom and listen to music. But when he began playing guitar, he suddenly realized that it would be great if he could somehow amplify the sound. Like everyone else back then, he just had an acoustic guitar, and the only volume he could get was how hard he hit the strings. Then he suddenly realized it would be nice if he could somehow make that guitar louder. And what to me is a really amazing thing, the idea that Les came up with initially was he took the needle from a record player. You can see it there, it's that small object above the radio. And it's literally the needle that came from the record player over here and that played the records. And Les took this needle and jammed it into his guitar, just right through the wood, down near the hole in the guitar, and jammed that needle through there. Then he took a piece of wire and took the wire and brought it to this radio. The radio then served as both an amplifier and a speaker for his music. That was his first electric guitar, and to me it's a pretty amazing thing for a young man who was only 12 or 13 years old to actually come up with the idea that he could take a needle from a record player and amplify his guitar. When Les began playing, he realized that people couldn't always hear his voice. He tells stories about playing at drive-in movie theaters, and people would come by and say, well, it's great, we can hear your guitar, but we can't hear your voice. So he realized he needed some sort of a microphone. And what he came up with is what you see here. It looks like a telephone on a broomstick in a cinder block, and that's exactly what it is. Les realized that in the telephone, you actually had a little microphone, and that's what picked up your voice as you would talk. So he took his telephone, stuck it on a broomstick, jammed it into this cinder block, and created a microphone on a stand. He then wired it once again through his little Sears radio, and the radio again acted as an amplifier and a speaker. So that way, Les's voice could be amplified. Behind the telephone is a little microphone that's actually a very vintage microphone that Les had from a ham radio set that he used. Again, like I say, Les Paul was very inquisitive. He was into electronics, he was into music, and was constantly fiddling with stuff, whether it was creating microphones, creating crystal radio sets, whatever. He tried it.